Karla Cardno was a well-liked 13-year-old girl who was abducted, sexually assaulted and murdered in Lower Hutt, near Wellington, in New Zealand. This story contains graphic content and won't be suitable for everyone. 1989 was a big year. The Berlin Wall began to fall as political revolutions swept through Eastern Europe, and the once mighty USSR started to crumble. Buck Shelford was the captain of the All Blacks, and David Lange resigned as the Prime Minister of New Zealand. The Dead Poets Society starring Robin Williams was released in cinemas. The 1980s were coming to an end, and in some respects so was New Zealand's innocence. A number of serious violent crimes would occur in the late 80s and early to mid-90s that changed the way we live. Doors that were previously open were beginning to be deadbolted. Taita in 1989 was much like it is today, a suburb of Lower Hutt, populated mostly by working class people, its streets lined by state houses and trade vehicles both full of people living paycheck to paycheck. Pockets of gang activity and criminal behaviour, the minority that gave a perhaps unfair reputation to an area that also had so much hardworking Kiwi spirit. My grandparents settled here after they were married and raised a family of 14 children. And that's largely what Taita was. Big families of good people, kids playing sports outside and parents growing vegetables in the garden. On the evening of Friday, May the 26th, 1989, Karla Cardno decided to ride her bike to the local Foursquare to buy an Evening Post newspaper, a bottle of Fanta, and jelly tip ice creams. It was a trip she regularly made with her younger brother, but on this occasion she went alone. The ride was less than 600 metres each way, and in those days, a 13-year-old going to the shops alone was common. It's still quite common today. The person working at Foursquare that night remembers her coming in and that they had run out of newspapers. After that, details get very hazy. There were witness reports of Carla running around the shopping centre, of a man chasing her. People saw her looking scared and she entered a takeaway bar for a short time. At approximately 7:15 p.m, a woman heard a short, loud scream from her home on Churton Crescent. When Carla wasn't home after some time, her mother Veronica went to look for her. All she found was her abandoned bike and the Fanta bottle on a street corner. She rushed home to alert the police, who had already received reports of Carla's agitated behaviour in the shopping centre. They launched a search. Family and friends sprang into action. Her mother's then partner, Mark Middleton, rushed back to Lower Hutt from Whanganui. He was sure that she wouldn't run away and that something bad must have happened. They searched through the night, but with no success. They had to wait until the 8th of July for answers, and those answers were not the ones they wanted. While they searched in vain, Paul Daly hid her trust in an upstairs bedroom on Churton Crescent. He viciously sexually assaulted her during this time. Details of the acts that he committed are available online, but I simply don't want to say them here. When police first talked to him, he was vacuuming his car boot. They asked Daly what he'd been doing at the time Carla went missing. He told them he was with his family, a family that had walked out on him 3 weeks prior. Daly was a labourer and a martial arts expert. He likely had little trouble subduing Carla. At some stage in the dead of night, Daly left Churton Crescent and took Carla to the Pencarrow coast south of Eastbourne, which is at the mouth of Wellington Harbour. It is beautiful and isolated. The first manned lighthouse in New Zealand stands above the beach on the gorse-covered hills. Daly was working for the Hutt Valley Drainage Board and had keys to unlock the gate to the gravel road that winds around the coast. He had a distinctive vehicle which was seen by witnesses in the area. When he got far enough along the road, Daly took Carla from his vehicle and bludgeoned her over the back of her head with a piece of driftwood, fracturing her skull. He then buried her in a shallow grave, thinking that she was dead. She wasn't, though, and perhaps the only solace is that her brain injury would have been so severe that she's unlikely to have known anything about her death. As with any investigation, there was 2 timelines. The first was the sad reality of what happened. The second was the investigation by police. A comprehensive search of the Hutt Valley went on at the same time, and hope dwindled in the coming weeks. As police began to increasingly focus on Daly, they also began to focus on the remote coast at Pencarrow. Police found physical evidence in Daly's home that placed Carla there, but still he would not admit to what he had done. It wasn't until July the 8th that Daly broke. Under intense questioning by the police, he confessed and led them to where he'd buried her. Prior to his admission of guilt, Daly tried to take his own life with an overdose of pills. He failed. After attempting to withdraw his admission of guilt at a depositions hearing, Daly finally pled guilty. In March of 1990, he was sentenced to life in prison. Psychologists have stated that he has little insight into his crimes and that he has personality traits that are unlikely to change with treatment. He had a history of violence towards women and of sexual sadism. It is said that this developed during his teenage years, but information on these events is scarce. He has since confessed that he enjoyed the crime. He has been before the parole board a number of times but has been denied. He spent time in a child sex offenders unit from 2013. The aftermath of any horrific act ripples through the whole community, but those closest are always hardest hit. Carla's mother, Veronica, understandably moved away from the area. In 2001, Mark Middleton, Carla's stepfather, was given a suspended sentence for openly threatening to kill Daly if he was ever released, a sentiment that I think most of us can sympathise with. In 2009, Carla's biological father, Gary John Duffin, and his wife, Sharon Hills, were convicted on charges related to the rape of a minor. Only 2 years after Carla's murder, Duffin raped a 14-year-old girl. Hills was also involved with drugging and subduing her. Duffin has since admitted to using Carla's murder as an excuse for his offending. Their victim had apparently been working at a brothel the pair owned in Mount Victoria. In 2021, it was reported that Paul Joseph Daly was seriously unwell in prison, suffering from an unspecified illness. I have it on good authority that he has cancer. Some cancers can interfere with the body's ability to metabolize pain relief medication. I only add that as speculation, but it would be a form of justice if he was to experience something of the fear and pain that he inflicted. No child or family should have to go through anything like this. Unfortunately, though, monsters like Paul Joseph Daly exist. Some people are, for whatever reason, unsafe for the rest of us to be around, and Daly is clearly one of those people. He probably stood watching Sheridan Crescent from his window for some time before he finally acted on his sick desires. A predator in the midst of an unsuspecting community. I wonder how many other children fell under his gaze before Carla was chosen. It's terrible that a smiley, kind, bright 13-year-old girl had her life so brutally and tragically ended. I would like to convey my deepest sympathies to her family and friends and to remind people to watch over those that they love. Rest in peace and love, Carla. Thank you for watching. This was a tough video to make, and I really appreciate people taking the time to watch. If there's a case you'd like me to cover in more detail than I do on TikTok, please suggest it in the comments here.